Thank you to everybody. It looks like we have an awful lot of people that have logged in. I want to say thank you for attending. My name's Rachel Halford and I'm the CEO at the Hepatitis C Trust, and we are really pleased to be able to facilitate this webinar alongside the Haemophilia Society and UK Thalassaemia Society. So we're facilitating this to ensure that you, the community, have as many chances as possible to engage with the Infected Blood Compensation Authority. As we all know, a lot of information's been released, and we know people would really appreciate some more clarity on many issues. Some of you, and I hope many of you, in fact, I think, will have attended another webinar that we ran last September. Goodness me, I can't believe we're at the beginning of a new year, which we got some really positive feedback from. We hope that this webinar today will be as useful to everybody. So I'm going to leave it there. We want to maximise the amount of time for questions with IBCA to talk about the compensation system and, you know, really kind of be able to answer as many questions as possible. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand over first to Deborah from the Haemophilia Society, followed by Chris from the UK Thalassaemia Society to introduce themselves. And then Layla Reid, who I'm sure you'll all know, will go through how to use the Q&A, etc., a bit of housekeeping, before we hand over to Sir Robert Francis and the IBCA team. So with that, it gives me great pleasure to hand it over to you, Deborah.
Hello, everybody. Hi, so I'm Deborah Morgan. I'm Head of Policy and Campaigns here at the Haemophilia Society. So first of all, I'd like to thank all of our members for sending in questions in advance, and thank you for those. We have collated as many questions as possible and sent those over to the to IBCA so that they can collate the questions in advance. We won't probably have time to answer all of the questions, but any that we don't answer today, we will try and get answers for later. And I would also like to say that this is a slightly different format from those members who are used to our webinars, because obviously normally we would have cameras on. So it is a slightly different format because this is being recorded so that people can access this later on. Thanks very much. I'll hand over to Chris.
Hello, thank you very much indeed. Good afternoon to everybody. My name is Chris Sotirelis. I'm a previous trustee of the UK Thalassaemia Society, and I have been involved with hepatitis C, amongst other things, and also in collaboration with the Haemophilia Society and Hep C Trust in previous developments and activities, even predating the inquiry. Our community is very small, relatively speaking, in the UK, and we have a number of issues. The main issue, obviously, is the need to have monthly or very regular blood transfusions, because our patients are not able, because of a genetic inheritance disease, thalassemia, they are not able to produce normal adult hemoglobin, and therefore need to live a life of constant hospital admissions or outpatient admissions and having blood transfusions. And along with that comes a number of other issues, particularly the loading up with iron, which creates many problems in the various organs. And as a direct result of the blood transfusions, we have been also engaged or involved and infected with hepatitis C over many years. We are very pleased to have this opportunity to discuss these matters and to get further development and further progress from IBCA and colleagues. And to participate in this platform, which is very good, and giving the opportunity to patients directly from the community to ask individual questions, either through us or directly to the experts, and to know better what is the latest update and latest progress about the developments vis-a-vis the infected blood inquiry, vis-a-vis the compensation schemes, and various other questions about the infected and affected persons in the community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris. I'll take over from here. Hi, everyone. My name is Layla Reid. I work for the Hepatitis C Trust. And I am hoping that James could pop a slide up now. I'm just going to quickly run through the kind of how the webinar is working. So as Deborah said, this is a slightly different format. We've done it this way so that we can record the webinar and put it online. But what that means is, number one, it's being recorded, but to maintain anonymity for everybody, no one can switch on their camera unless they are a presenter, or speak or turn on and use their video. So what we're asking people to do is put their questions in the Q&A. So if you look at the slide just at the bottom, circled in red, that's where the Q&A box. And if you click on there, you'll be able to post your questions into the box there. Underneath the area where you can type, there's a tick box to say that you want your question to be anonymous. So that means that no one will be able to see who the questioner is. Otherwise, I think other participants, and certainly us as the people running the webinar, will be able to see your name. But none of that will be recorded in the video that is provided after, that will be recorded from this session. So none of the writing and none of the names or anything that go in the Q&A will be able to see, only the video and the spoken words of the people who are presenting. So Rachel and Deborah and I will be keeping an eye on the questions as we go and posing them as we go. And as I think Rachel said, we will try and get to as many as we possibly can, but we did receive a huge number in advance of the session, and we will probably receive lots more today. So so when we can't do that, we will make sure that we that they're answered after the webinar. Okay, I think that's all I need to cover. Thank you. And I think on that note, if James, you could put the slide down. Brilliant. We can hand over to IBCA and Sir Robert Francis.
Thank you very much indeed. And thank you to Rachel, Layla, Deborah and Chris for organising this. I can't tell you how important we at IBCA think these sort of sessions are. Some of you will know that since we set up, we have been meeting mainly to date representatives of the various organisations in this field, which has been extremely informative in what we're in helping us set up what we're doing, and also in allowing us to disseminate information to those who are interested in receiving it. We are now embarking on trying to get to wider audiences, such as the one we have here today. And my counter tells me that we now have it went up from 299 to 300 people, which is absolutely fantastic. So thank you very much to all the societies involved in setting us up, and to all of you for attending. Just if I may, a word about why we do this. When I became interim chair of IBCA, I made it clear to those appointing me that I thought that we were going to get nowhere in providing the service of assessing people, providing for their claims and paying money to them, unless we involved everyone in all those people in how we set it up. And I don't need me to tell you that for many years there hasn't been sufficient involvement of the victims of this terrible scandal in how to sort it out, or in particular in how to deal with the compensation. And I was determined and remain determined that in relation to what it is our duty to do, which is to pay those who are entitled to compensation what they're entitled to as fairly, as proportionately, and frankly as quickly as possible, and there's a lot hanging on those words, as possible, then we need to involve you in working out how to do that. I also made it clear that I wanted to lead an organisation which was transparent, which means that we continually kept people informed about what we were doing and how we were doing it, and that we were candid. In other words, we wouldn't pretend we could do things that we can't do, and we would be honest if we made mistakes, and we would try and tell you as we go along how we're getting along, and this is part of that process. I'd like to introduce you briefly to two people I brought along here, two non-executive colleagues who are on my board. Sir Rob Behrens, who's a former ombudsman, and Helen Parker, who's a former deputy chief officer of which. And the reason I mentioned them is not to embarrass them, but to emphasise to you that IBCA, set up by an Act of Parliament, is an independent organisation. It's what's called an arm's length body. And that means that although we are given and depend upon government money in order to do our work, we are operationally independent. In other words, that how we set about our duty imposed on us by Parliament, which is to pay compensation, how we set about doing that is a matter for us. We are, though, constrained by the regulations that it is the government's duty to get through Parliament. And as you know, they've so far produced, not quite one half of the necessary regulations, which allows us to get on with processing claims by infected eligible people, at least part of their claim. There will be a second set of regulations, which I think we can talk about later, which will deal with supplementary claims and also claims by affected people. We as an authority do not set those regulations. We do not make the policy. Our duty is to implement it. So while it's perfectly understandable that people frequently ask us questions about why particular things are in or not in the regulations, those are questions that only the government can answer, not us. If you want to ask, however, about how we intend to operationalise our work, how we're going to set about assessing people, paying them, then of course those are matters we would keenly like to discuss with you. So I think that's all I want to say at this stage. I know you've got lots of questions and you don't want to hear me all the time, but I'd now like, if I may, to hand over to David Foley, who's our Chief Executive.
Thank you, Sir Robert, and good afternoon, everybody. My name is David Foley. I'm the Chief Executive for the Infected Blood Compensation Authority. Thank you very much for the invitation to come and join your webinar today. It's a great opportunity, as Sir Robert has said, and it's a great opportunity because we want to put you, the community, at the heart of what we do, which is why talking to you, listening to the questions you have, explaining how we are going about doing this is so critically important. Thank you for the opportunity to be able to do that. Let me start just by sharing a bit of our progress with you so that you can see what we've done and how far we have come. So you'll know that on the 24th of May last year, we were announced and we really were a fledgling organisation at that point. There was, in fact, Sir Robert and there was me, and that was it as far as the Infected Blood Compensation Authority was concerned. And you'll see today, we brought some of our executive team along with us, and you'll see that we have, developed, and I'll talk a bit about the progress in terms of the work we have done as well. We have a fully fledged board, we have a fully fledged executive team, we've got staff who are progressing claims, and we've got more staff coming online as well. So, big steps from those first days in May when it was just Sir Robert and I. In fact, in October, we invited our first group of people to claim compensation, and those people and more are now going through the process on live compensation claims, working with our claims managers to get the compensation that they are due, and that progress has been good. There's very much more that we have to do, of course. These are the first early steps, and a lot to come. And we value your feedback and guidance throughout this as we develop the compensation scheme. So this is a great opportunity to talk to you and for you to talk to us. It's not the only opportunity, and we will continue to work really hard to listen to what you've got to say and to garner opinions and to understand how well we are doing. Today we're hoping to give you a bit more detail and a bit more reassurance on what has happened. You'll have seen in things like the budget that the government has allocated a substantial £11.8 billion to the compensation scheme. They've been very clear that is not the limit. That is for the purposes of setting a set of accounts for the government. They have to choose a figure which they think is their best estimate, but they've been very clear that's not the limit, and they will pay all the compensation that is due, however much that totals to. And I want to assure you that we are, as Robert said, an independent body, and we will implement the law as it is specified, regardless of however much that compensation scheme totals to. So I'll give you a little more detail about the claims that are progressing so far. So I said in October we invited up to 20 people to take part in the first test of how we will support and pay claims. And that first group of people who received invitations to claim came from a spread of people across these 4 criteria. The first is that they were known to be already eligible for compensation. The second is that they were registered with support schemes, which means that it's likely that a substantial amount of information on them is already held to help process the claim. That they came from areas all across the UK, so we didn't want it to be from one specific location. We wanted a spread of people from across different locations in the UK, and also that those people represented a range of infection types and severity within those infections. The reason we chose those criteria and such a spread was we wanted to learn as much as we could about the different circumstances that people were in, and that really helps us to test the development of the service. Since then, we've invited a further 25 people before Christmas. So as you can see, as soon as we are ready to invite a new set of people, we are. Our aim is to continue to develop that invitation up to around 250 claims by the end of March. And this will be a really intense learning period for us, where we can make sure that the system is well designed for all of the circumstances that people find themselves in. This is really important because you've probably been on the end of other government IT systems where people have done it differently, where they've sat in a dark room, assumed that they can know all about their users, and then have launched a system on a date to go live. And inevitably, I suspect your experience of those systems will have been that they either fell over at launch, or that they built up such a backlog of work because the system was not well suited to their users' circumstances that it was a very difficult system to navigate. Those are all the things that we are aiming to avoid by all of this user research, which is so important. It will also mean that we can deliver our services to a much larger group of people much faster. And you'll see from March how we accelerate through that. And I'd just like to finish before inviting some of my colleagues to come in with a thank you to all of the people who have helped to shape that user research. It is invaluable that people give their time to provide that information and their insight. And it's a gift to everybody else who will use the service in the future. So thank you to everybody who has participated. Now, I know my colleague, Celine McLaughlin, who's our Director of Digital, was really looking forward to be here. Unfortunately, she is unwell, so she isn't here, and she sends her apologies. But I will pass over now to Cindy Skelden, who is our Director of Operations. Cindy, do you want to tell us a little bit about operations, please?
I will do. Thanks, David. Good afternoon, everybody. So my name's Cindy Skelden, and I'm the Director of Operations. And it is, as it says on the tin, so I am responsible for the claim managers and processing the claims for compensation. So any queries that you have, any emails, if you want to phone us up with anything, then I have the teams that will manage that as well. So we have a claimant resolution support centre who will take those queries, and then your claim managers, and you get a dedicated claim manager when it comes to your time to making a claim. We think that's really important to build the relationship, to advocate on your behalf, and to help you get that evidence that you need as well. So we've currently got 20 claim managers, and we've got 10 people working in the Claimant Support and Resolution Centre. Now, you might think that's low. It was. We started low because, as David said, we are building the service and learning as we go. And that includes all of the guidance and learning materials and everything else as well. But I wouldn't worry about that. We have a live recruitment campaign at the minute that closes tomorrow, and to date we've had about 2,500 applications for the claim manager, and we'll be looking to, at this stage, recruit up to about 500 claim managers as we build the service and we go as well. And that obviously includes all the related functions that goes with that as well. The learning journey. So again, we are iterating the learning journey and we are learning from the community. Indeed, when we onboard the first group of claim managers, we had people from the community come along and talk to them. So that first part of the learning is all about being a trauma-informed organisation, how they handle cases, emotional intelligence, unconscious bias, psychological safety, all of that kind of thing, before they then get into the technical learning, legislation, taking people through the claim form, the process, what all of that means. So obviously building that as we go and learning as we go as well, especially as new regulations come in and everything else. As David said, the claim service is tested regularly as we move into further phases with increasingly bigger groups of people. I think my key focus is making sure I deliver a really secure and accurate service, which protects from fraud as well as anything else. So I think that's about enough of an introduction from me. I'm sure you've got plenty of questions for us. I think I'm handing over to John.
You are, as soon as I can unmute. Thank you, Cindy. Hi, everyone. I am John Kelly. I'm the Director of Data. What does a Director of Data do? Well, for IBCA, it kind of comes in three parts. So the first part is to make sure, the most important part, make sure that we're working securely and sensitively with the data that we need to work through claims, make sure that we're storing it safely and sensitively. Also, to support the flow of information that might be needed to support a claim. We've heard lots that, you know, many of you have already provided information to various bodies over the years, and you shouldn't have to do that again. And I completely agree. So a big part of my role is to make sure that you don't have to, that we can remove some of that burden on your behalf. And the third point is to support IBCA so it can become more transparent on both its activity and its performance. So we are a communicative organisation that we're telling you how we're performing. We're doing so publicly. We're working in the open. What have we done so far on those three? Well, it's probably fair to say that we've been spending the majority of the time in the first two areas. So we've built a secure data store. It all sounds very dreary, but sadly it's quite important, making sure that the information that we hold is very safe and can be used by the claim managers and we can do so very quickly so that the claims process isn't slowed unnecessarily. We've also taken responsibility for the information in Skipton Fund from the closed schemes and are moving information from the existing IB schemes to IBCA as well. And we're doing all of that to make sure that when the claim process starts, the claim manager has all of the information that they need where possible to make sure that that claim process is slick and information flows through safely. As the service opens more widely, what we can expect is a lot more diverse information needs, a lot more partners we might need to engage in terms of evidence that we'll need to see. And you can rest assured that I'll be working on your behalf to make sure I'm connecting with those partners and where I can, getting information quickly, either in advance of the claim starting or as the claim starts. I think now I'm passing on to Rachel.
Great, thanks, John. Hi, everyone. I know you'll be keen to get started on questions, so I'll be as quick as I can. I'm Rachel Forster, and I'm Director of Communications and Engagement for IBCA. And just thank you once again for joining today's webinar. I know most of you are probably wanting to get to your dinner and other things of an evening, so it's really appreciated that you're taking this time to ask us your questions as well. Some of you may have already engaged with us. For example, hopefully you've signed up to our mailing list where you get the latest community updates. You may have sent us a letter or email or other questions. sessions, or you may have met us in recent sessions. And we've spoken to hundreds of community members across all 4 nations, but there is absolutely a lot more to do yet, and we recognise that. We've got very much a community first approach. That's not just jargon to us, that is absolutely about everything we do. We look for opportunities to shape and improve our work with your feedback, but also tell you when things are changing. And that's why it's really important you sign up for those updates that we do via our mailing list, because wherever we have something to say, is the service issuing more invites to claim? Are we changing something? Do we need your feedback? All of that will be included in there, so please do sign up. We meet community members and representatives each week. These sort of events are absolutely invaluable to make sure we're hearing your views, but also your concerns, and we can make sure that we adapt accordingly. As David said earlier, we are testing and learning as we go, and hearing your feedback really helps us do that. That's it from me. I suggest Rachel, Layla and others, we go straight into questions so we make the most of the time.
It's brilliant. Thank you very much, Rachel. And thank you everybody else for the introductions and the overview, and to have an understanding of kind of some of the things that are happening behind the scenes. I've got the first order questions. So just to reiterate, these are questions that we had sent in earlier. So I think Deborah spoke about them and Layla did too. I wanted to just note that to make it clear that some of the pre-submitted questions we received, they did relate to the compensation scheme, and we've passed those on to the Cabinet Office. So I'm going to start with a first chunk of questions, and these ones are really, we're trying to group them together so that we could get some answers that would, some unified answers for you. Some of this I've been seeing coming up in the question boxes. Please keep putting your questions in the question box. Okay, so this is around timelines and the frustration which is experienced by the community around engagement. I think there's been a lot of this, and it's really quite complicated. There's a lot of vagueness around it, and many people, one of the key things is that, many people are now elderly. It's created a degree of uncertainty and a worry about the timelines of when this is all going to be addressed, and very much extends to the estates and those deceased and the affected communities. So with that in mind, the first question that I've got here that was submitted was, when will the next statutory instrument be put before Parliament to agree the compensation arrangements for the estates and the affected? And what is IBCA's role in this, and how will the community be engaged in the development of the legislation?
Thank you. Sir Robert, let me pass to you for that one.
Thank you. And can I start off, Rachel, by saying how much we share the frustration about how long things have taken. And I'm afraid, as you will find out in answers to the questions that are coming, how long things will take, because none of what we've been asked to do is simple. But in relation to the statutory instruments, these are, of course, a matter for the government. And as you will all know, there is currently one set of regulations which was passed by Parliament on the 23rd of August, or became effective on that date, which only dealt with part of the overall scheme, namely what are called the core entitlements of people who have been infected, and those are part of the claims that David mentioned, that we've started doing sort of test runs on how we should approach those. The second set of regulations, which we await and before which we cannot start actually setting up a system to deal with, are the regulations which will entitle people who are being affected by what has happened to infected people, and also claims by infected people for what are called supplementary claims, which are about basically loss of earnings, financial loss, and care costs. The government has said, Minister of the Cabinet Office has said, that the government is aiming to have these regulations enforced by the 31st of March of this year. So at some point before then, and I'm afraid I can't tell you when, those regulations will be published. In terms of who is responsible for those, as I made it clear, it is the Cabinet Office, the government, the Cabinet Office Minister, who are responsible for formulating those regulations which provide the meat of the scheme, and it is they who are responsible for engagement with the community about those regulations. As and when they are published, we can then start talking to people like yourselves about how we would operationalize those. Of course, that will produce different considerations to how we set about providing the compensation for those who've been infected. There are different groups of people with different problems. So we will start then putting together the system which will enable those compensation payments to be started. I hope that's enough to give you an idea. Not that I'm suggesting that is going to satisfy people, but the facts are there. We will expect regulations to be enforced by the 31st of March, and we will then be able to talk more to you about what we will be doing about setting up our systems to deal with those.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. So I've got another question here. So a timeline of claims being processed would manage expectations and ease frustrations. I think that's been asked for a lot. We all know things change, but a simple timeline would give a rough idea of when the compensation will be offered. When will this be available? And I think this question has come up a lot, and I'm not sure, Rachel, if you want this one to go to David. Is it a David question?
Yes, I'll pass to David. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel. Rachel, completely understand why people are keen to have a timetable and to understand it. And we are, absolutely committed and dedicated to moving this forward as fast as possible and ensuring that we open up to people who are eligible as soon as we can. We're also committed that we as and when things become apparent, we will tell you, the community, first, and we'll tell you everything that we know as well. What we are doing is, as we explained, we're in this period where we are making sure that we understand the circumstances that people are in, that we're building a system that reflects and matches those. And it's really important that we get that evidence before we start to build it and build it out. We're also dependent on the regulations coming into force. So Robert has just told you about our dependency on those and those being laid. And of course, we can't start building and designing the system that applies to those parts of the compensation scheme until the regulations have been finalised and set in place as well. I mentioned earlier that we are on this trajectory of aiming to deal with the claims of 250 people by the end of March in our current way of working. We have been, in recent weeks, have been talking to the community about what we do post-April, what we do from April, how we move forward there, and using the information that we get from real cases being trialled, working from the information that we get on views from the community, and working on, obviously, the regulations that set out what we're required to do. We will set out how the trajectory post-April will work. And of course, back to the point I made at the beginning, we will tell you first. You'll be the first people we tell the community once we know what that trajectory is. But we know our journey to March, and we'll come out with the more information as soon as we can.
So perhaps there'll be a bit of a timeline then, because it seems to me like March is a key point. I've got one last question before I hand over to Deborah. I think that both you and Sir Robert have actually answered this, and I don't know whether, I think Rachel said perhaps ask it to Cindy. So maybe just to reiterate, because it's come up in the question box many times already, you've all said it, but just for one last time, to date, how many claims have been fully settled by IBCA? How many offers have been made to date, and how many have been settled? And then what is the expected number of claims completed per month from April? So I appreciate that you've already said this, but if perhaps somebody could put it into that package. Rachel, who's that going to?
Yeah, quite right. I'm going to hand to Cindy, but just a quick note before we do that. We're very aware that these numbers are so important. It shows you that this progress is being made, payments are going out, and that's why as soon as possible we intend to start publishing these numbers regularly as well, so that everyone can see them and you know how we're progressing. But Cindy, over to you.
Yeah, so what I'll share is the latest published figures. So I'll answer the last one first about how many claims will be processed from April onwards, or for April. And going back to what David was saying, until we know what we will be actually doing from April, we're unable to give that figure until we know like what the next range of claimants that we'll be looking at. So I can't answer that one for now. But what I can tell you is, out of the first 16 claimants that we have made 10 offers. And out of those 10 offers, we've made 6 payments. And the 10 offers in totaled over £13 million. So obviously you can work out the average from that yourself, although they do differ because it does depend if somebody opts to take a full IBCA compensation, or if actually they opt to take a reduced IBCA core sum and support payments for life.
Rachel, I wonder if I could just add a word to that. I'm fully aware that these are, of course, tiny numbers in proportion to the number of people who are entitled to compensation. However, it does, to my mind, amount to an historic moment, because people have been fighting for compensation for decades, and they can now see that compensation is actually being paid. And not only is it being paid, as you can see from the figures, really significant sums of money are involved. And I would remind you that what is being paid over in some cases will not be the whole of their award, partly for the reason Cindy mentions, but also because they may want to make a supplementary application when the new regulations come out. So we have made a start, and also we talk about 250 people by at the end of March. My feeling is that once we get to that sort of stage, the increases in volume of claims we're going to be able to process will increase exponentially. But the advantage of doing it this way, as David has indicated, is that there's a much better chance that we'll be getting it right and not getting it wrong some of the time. So we will overall benefit the whole cohort of people entitled more quickly than we might have done otherwise. That's the method behind what might otherwise seem to be very slow progress. But I do appreciate the frustrations that people have and the urgency, because of the reasons that are being mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely right.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to hand over to Deborah now. You've got some questions from the pre-received. Sorry, Deborah, over to you.
Yes, absolutely. And actually, just before we go on to that, I've been scanning through the questions that are going into the Q&A box. And just to say, firstly, I know some people are putting in quite a lot of detail in there about their individual circumstances. Obviously, we wouldn't be able to read those out. We wouldn't because of anonymity tonight. But if any of you want to email me at the Haemophilia Society, if it's directly to do with bleeding disorders, or obviously to Hep C Trust, I'm sure we can help you navigate some of those more complicated system queries that you have. And also to say there are also a few there on interim payments to estates, and again that is not being dealt through by IBCA. That's an outreach of the IBIS scheme. So again, we won't be answering those, but we will pick those up, and through later we'll try and pick any of those up, or again come to me at the Haemophilia Society and we'll help you navigate that, or at least try and help you navigate the interim payment and probate. Yeah, so sorry, just to clarify on those points. So I'm going to skip the first question because I think that's already been answered, but one of the things that obviously people are very keen to know, because they want to plan their futures, is what this actually means for them and how can they calculate what this is actually going to mean for them as an individual. So can we expect to see a compensation calculator or ready reckoner to be available on the IBCA website for people to input their data and see what this actually means for them and the timelines involved? On that
yes, let me come in on that one. We have heard that feedback loud and clear, and thank you so much to all who've shared that with us so far. We know that a calculator would be very helpful, and we're working on it at the moment based on that feedback that we've heard from the community. It's in design at the moment, and we're starting to test it. You may have heard some people who were randomly selected from those who volunteered to help us with service design, i.e. come and look at the systems and work out if it's going to work for them in practice. We've invited people in over the next few weeks to have a go at the calculator that's been designed and say, does it work for them? Are there any builds or improvements we can make to it before we put it live on our website? The working date at the moment is that we have that live by March. We will keep you updated as always. I'm going to sound like a stuck record here in our community updates. Please sign up for those. But we're very conscious that that will be useful for those to calculate what they may receive. I should just give a caveat at this point that the calculator is likely to give a range. The reason being that until you come to the point of your claim and work with Cindy's team and the claim managers, of course, you can't put in every detail into a calculator that is built for so many people. So chances are when you put your details into the calculator, it won't be everything that might be taken into account at the point of claim. So just bear in mind, you may well get some ranges of figures in that calculator. And of course, when you do get to point of claim, the managers will be there to really support you and help you through those details.
Thank you, Rachel. And I'm presuming as well, just clarify that obviously if this is coming out in March, this will not include anything which is under the second legislation, which would mean the supplementary route, so enhanced payments or anything connected with a special category mechanism, because that could be additional payments that people get later.
Yeah, quite right. That, on that, Deborah, we would hope to improve the calculator once we know what those second regulations look like, once, of course, they've been laid in Parliament, etc. But the intention is for the first version of the calculator that it will be available for those to look at what they may receive if they are infected and or for estates as well.
Okay, so infected and estates, but obviously, again, not affected people because that legislation won't have been passed by that point.
Precisely. And we know that's frustrating for those who may want to do those calculations who are affected. But as Sir Robert said earlier, until we see those regulations laid in Parliament, of course, we don't know all the details. But when we do have that information, we can start working it through and then start looking at developing our calculator further.
Okay, thank you. So the next question I want to talk about is monthly payment versus a lump sum for future care and loss of earnings. So we know that people have the option, if they so wish, to carry on in receipt of their support payments that they currently receive through the IBIS schemes, but they also have the option to actually take a lump sum instead of that if they wanted to. So the question is, how would a lump sum for future care and loss of earnings award be calculated? Because I think some people are thinking that it's literally just the support schemes in a lump sum, and that is not the case. So could somebody give some clarity around that?
Yeah, absolutely. So let me go to Cindy for some of that calculation work, which the claims managers will be doing when they support people through their claims.
Yeah, exactly that. And I think that's really important as well, that people won't be alone in terms of making these choices. So not only will the claim manager give a comparison to what each amount means, but of course we do pay for some financial support as well if people want to get that financial advice to help them make what is really a very important decision. So they can actually, as we said, either receive all of that compensation as a lump sum or periodic payments of that lump sum. So they could choose to have it in 5-year periods, 10 years or 25s, or they can have a reduced lump sum and then continue to get that regular support scheme payment for life, as you said, Deborah, as well. So as I said, we can support with financial advice. What we will do, the dedicated claim manager will support them through the process, but they'll do that they'll do that comparison. So we'll compare the future financial loss award and the future care award with the person's estimated support scheme payments up to the healthy life expectancy. They'll do the difference there, and where the awards under the scheme are higher, then the person, the claimant, will receive a support scheme top-up award, which will be paid on top of that compensation by ourselves, so that makes sure that they're not worse off. But like I say, it is quite a detailed calculation that people will get, and we won't just post it out or email it out. The claim manager will go through it step by step at every stage, Deborah, so we take the person with us at all stages, so it's fully understood and that choices are fully understood and considered. And I think it's important to point out as well, we don't expect a decision overnight. We give up to 3 months longer if needed for people to actually ponder on that and come back to let us know what it is either they'd like to accept and how they would like to accept that offer as well, to make sure they take the right advice.
Okay, thank you. And again, would there be a calculator available for people to get an idea on this? Because we know from many calls that people are anxious to be able to sort of start planning their life and what that means for them for financial security going forward. So again, will there be a calculator available for people to let's get a fairly good idea of what that means for them?
So from what I understand and from what Rachel just updated on the calculator, I will show how that would look as well. So not just what you'd be entitled to, but give you the comparison.
Okay, thank you.
We will help people through it though, Deborah.
Okay, thank you very much, Cindy. Just another question actually regarding ongoing monthly support. And this is actually if somebody selects monthly ongoing support and then sadly they then die, would this then pass on to their wife or their partner, and would they then be able to carry on receiving those support payments?
Yeah, good question. David, would you like to come in on that one?
Thanks, Rachel. Yeah, very happy to. Thanks, Deborah. We know this is a really important question for people. It is how the current support scheme is set up, but it's not how the government has set up the support scheme payments under the full compensation scheme. So only those currently on support scheme affected and their bereaved partners will be able to continue to receive the support payments for life. There are, although, other routes for the spouse of somebody who is bereaved. So they are, for example, entitled to make a claim for any remaining compensation balance if the compensation has been paid in instalments. And those, of course, include the future care and the financial loss awards as part of an estate's claim. They'd also be able to make a claim in their own right as an affected individual. Now, obviously, we need a second set of regulations to be able to deal with affected claims. But under that scheme, a bereaved partner would be able to take their compensation either as a lump sum or as a periodic payment. This estate claims, of course, are in lump sums. So, no, they won't inherit the support payments, but there are other mechanisms available to them for the compensation scheme.
Okay, thank you. So that's really important for people making decisions, because that could have actually quite a big impact on what that there's if potentially their partner, their spouse could receive after their death.
It's a really important consideration, Deborah. And as Cindy said, this is one of the reasons we think it's so important that financial advice is available to people taking that decision, because some people will be very comfortable taking that decision. For other people, having advice will really help them decide what's the best thing for them.
And just to clarify, that is actually in the current legislation. That isn't something that's coming up for the future. Okay. One thing I also want to talk about now are for those people that are actually not currently registered on any of the schemes. And this is particularly for those people whose family members died before the trusts and schemes were initiated. So for them, there isn't any information held on the schemes. And so when will those people be able to start claims? And will they be able to get support from caseworkers in some cases to find documentation? Because in some cases there are people coming forward and say, well, I believe my family member died here, and actually because of the stigma surrounding a lot of this, it wasn't spoken about in the family. So how can we help support those people in the future?
Yeah, good question. And we know quite a lot of people are worried about getting hold of the right documentation, etc., as you say, Deborah. Let me pass to John, who I know has been looking at this.
Yeah, that's an important question, and guidance on how and what information claimants might need or the claims might benefit from is really important, and it's something that we're exploring now in terms of how we pull that together. And kind of go back to the point that Cindy made about the first few claims that we've invited. We're following that test and learn process. What's really important, not only in how we handle those claims and what information that we've needed, is what guidance can we develop that comes off the back of that to make sure that future claims are more informed. But we don't want to release that guidance too early. We are We intend to invite up to 250 people before March, and I think we'll need to go some way down that to make sure that guidance is robust enough to share and be useful and not accidentally misinformed because we haven't learnt enough about that claim process. That said, my purpose and my team's role here is to make sure that we are able to work on claimants' behalf to get information, especially in situations where someone may have passed away and that information is quite difficult to access. My job is to try and make that as simple as possible, to identify what the sources of those are, and to work on the claimant's behalf, especially in a situation where someone has passed, excuse me, someone has passed away. So we're doing lots of work now engaging with those potential partners, those potential lines of evidence, and building those relationships so that when we come to that point, we're able to kind of make sure that process is as slick as possible.
Okay, thank you. I'm now going to pass on, I think, is it back to Rachel?
I think it's to me.
I think it's
Oh,
to
it's to Layla. Yeah, sorry,
Yeah,
it's to Layla. Apologies.
That's
Thank
all right. You can take it there.
Thank you, Deborah. So I'm just gonna, I've got a few questions, and many of these have also come up in the Q&A about eligibility criteria and parity of conditions and cut-off dates and the supplementary routes. So the first question is about people, such as people who were given hepatitis C after 1991 who got hepatitis B, who have been excluded from the infected blood support schemes as they currently exist up until now, but will be included in the IBCA process. And we've had questions about when that the IBS criteria might change to enable them to be included in the IBS system, so the support scheme system, but also how long it's going to take for IBCA to start processing those applications for people who haven't previously been judged as eligible, and what extra evidence these people might need. I don't know, Rachel, who's best to answer that?
Thank you. Yeah, let me pass that to Sir Robert, and then John may want to come in on some of the evidence and document question. But Sir Robert, if you're happy to come in.
Well, I'll have a go. There's quite a lot packed into that question. The first point is that we recognise, and John might want to talk about this more. We because he already has a little bit. We recognise that the providing evidence for those who are not registered on schemes, either because they didn't have the evidence or they didn't qualify, could be challenging for them. And we are determined to do what we can to help people get the evidence. I emphasise we are an organisation who are trying to help people get compensation, not prevent them getting compensation. So that would be the first point I make. Secondly, how and when we're going to open up the scheme is a matter which will depend firstly on the tests we're currently doing and the learning we get out of that, and also what we decide about sequencing. And I should tell you that one of the most important decisions I think my board will be having to take in the very near future is how we sequence the categories of people who can make claims, assuming that we can't deal with all claims simultaneously, which I think would be unrealistic. So that is something we are currently considering. So I can't actually give you a precise answer to that question. But as far as the evidence is concerned, clearly we want to help as much as we can, either by getting the information ourselves from medical records and so on. You should remember that we as an authority have a statutory power to require people, that's organisations, to give us information. And so we can probably short circuit the sort of obstructions that are often put in the way of individuals in finding out things. So that obviously requires people's consent and so on, but we do have the power to do that. So I think with that, I will hand over to John.
Thank you. And I mean, you've hit the nail on the head there. What we are doing is working with those partners to that we expect to have information that will support that claim, and explaining that we will need to be able to engage with that. Now, you can imagine engaging with these. We'll be talking to these quite often as claims come through. So what we're doing right now is introducing ourselves to them and explaining what we are likely to need and working with them to agree what the right sort of evidence that we can expect we might need to see, and making sure that the pathways, the way that we move that information across, the way that they inform us, the way that we share our consent, the way that the claimant is involved in that process is as slick as possible. And we're also learning from the claims that we're already doing to make sure that that's informed. I think just under half of the claims that we've processed had all of the information in the files that we needed to make that claim, and where that information wasn't required primarily included infection dates and dates where severity of conditions had changed. Now, that's really helpful from my point of view, because it means I know what the evidence looks like, and we can start, and that's starting to inform how we design the guidance, and it's starting to inform which partners we engage with. But the more claims we process, the more informed and the better designed those processes are.
Thank you both. And I suppose from our perspective, from the work that we've done for many years with this population, we're talking about people who don't have, there is no medical evidence. It has been destroyed. So there is no data system that we're going to come across, or that you're going to be able to access that will hold something that will show an infection date, or something that will even show, the evidence of a transfusion. So I suppose possibly, and I'm, making assumptions based on people's questions, that's what they're asking, sort of what else are you considering that might be evidence? What else, how else could somebody demonstrate this? Because this has been a big issue, which is really well recognised within the inquiry. And if Sir Robert, if I just ask you to just quickly touch on the IBS question, and whether whether IBCA has any capacity to influence whether the IBS criteria would change in future.
Well, on that point, I think the answer's probably no. I mean, you need to ask the Cabinet Office whether they would change the criteria for IBS and then what happened to Scotland and Northern Ireland. So I don't think I can say anything about that. On the evidence point, I think I could say this. There's been quite a lot of anxiety about the use of the phrase "the balance of probabilities" in the regulations, and I would counsel people not to be too worried about that. All that means is it has to be thought to be more probable than not that the fact involved is a fact, and that means that really you don't. While obviously it's ideal to get medical evidence, can sort things out pretty quickly. We are. And obviously it depends on the facts of the individual case, but I mean, for instance, it would be possible to look at what a recent medical doctor treating someone or looking at someone thinks will have happened in the past. It might be possible to get a statement from a relative who recalls what happened before, and if they're believed, well, that would work. There wasn't evidence to the contrary, and so on. So I think we will have a completely open mind about the sort of material that might show, on a balance of probabilities, that's 51% against 49% chance that actually that is what happened. So we don't have to be certain about it. We just have to think it's probably the case. So if putting it bluntly, if people can provide us with credible evidence, and evidence is, again, can be just as much as someone's recollection, then we think we will be able to cater for most genuine cases. But I caution the fact that obviously we have a responsibility to ensure people don't deceive us and deceive you and the taxpayer, and so we will be putting in place precautionary measures with regard to that. But in terms of actual evidence, if there's believable evidence that's produced to us, the chances are it will be accepted.
And Layla, just to come in briefly on that, it's probably worth making a note of the fact that we are supporting claims, not assessing claims. Really important point, because we are not there to, try and look for reasons why we don't pay a claim. It is absolutely the opposite, which Cindy, I know, is very passionate about with her team of claims managers. We are there to support everyone who is eligible, to help them find a way to make sure that their claim is successful wherever we can and wherever we can show that eligibility. So, you know, please be reassured that we will do our very best to make sure that claims can go through.
Thank you. I think Chris and Cindy have their hands up. I'm going to ask them, if I don't know if it's my place to do this, to be really quick because we're nearly at 6 o'clock. I'm really conscious that we haven't even got through the pre-submitted questions, and there's a lot in the Q&A that we will cover, but there are some new areas which I think it's really important that we get to. Sorry, Chris.
Yes, thank you very much. Just a very quick question about the issue of change in severity. I mean, our patients have got multifactorial comorbidities, and particularly for liver disease, because of the infection, we know that it's neither binary, but variable, and usually is accompanied with a number of other liver-related problems. The issue is what happens after the assessment for the award of the compensation if their situation deteriorates, becoming, you know, decompensated or end-stage liver disease. What would be the pathway for these patients, and how do they continue to be supported by IBCA and the government at large in that eventuality, or are they completely excluded from any further support after the payment or the original assessment is done? Thank you.
Good question. Layla, if you're happy, I'm going to pass to Cindy because you've got your hand up already, Cindy, and then you might be able to cover two things in one.
Yeah, on that one, they'll already have that claim manager assigned, Chris, so they can come back to that claim manager at any other time. And I do believe it's already in place in the facility for them to come if they have a worsen of their condition, to come back and we will reassess if that's appropriate to do so. So just come back to your claim manager, they'll still be there and they'll support you through. Leila, just really quickly, my hand was up just on Sir Robert's point, just on the balance of probabilities. I probably should have said at the beginning that our claim managers work in a part of a multifunctional team. So they work with financial assessors to support the calculation, but also perhaps more importantly, they work with clinical advisors who are specialists in the field as well. So if we do need any specialist information or evidence, because of course we aren't clinicians or health practitioners, then we do have recourse to go and consult and get proper advice where we need to do so. Thank you.
That's great, Cindy. Thank you very much. I think that's really helpful to know. I'm going to move on to the next question, which is about the parity between people mono-infected with hepatitis C compared to those given HIV for the compensation amounts. There were lots of questions around this. I'm going to read one which says we need parity between mono-infected HIV and HCV, offering those with HCV who have lifelong illnesses 40% as opposed to 100% financial losses is discrimination. Rachel, I don't know who we want to go to for a response to that query.
Thanks, Layla. Yeah, I'm going to come to Sir Robert, but please, others, feel free to put your hand up if you want to be included as well, particularly because this was included in the interim report for the inquiry. But over to you, Sir Robert.
Yeah, we are aware, because at every meeting we go to, concerns are raised about this issue, and it's however, one of those issues upon which we have to say this is a decision for the Cabinet Office to take, who, in designing or the scheme that went into the regulations, decided they would accept actually the recommendation of the inquiry, which was that there should be this gradation in terms of severity in relation to HCV cases. Now, the inquiry didn't stipulate how any differential should take place, but it did accept that principle. So, and was it on the basis of the evidence and the expert evidence that they received. But the recommendation was that the definition of the severity should be defined by an independent clinical expert advisory panel. Well, the government set up a panel which was independent, contained clinical experts on it and legal advisors, and they decided that there were clinical markers that could differentiate between bands in relation to HCV, and they recommended what they are, and those are what are in the regulations. Now, that's not the only solution, I'm sure, that could have been come to, but it's the one they came to and the government accepted. I don't think it would be fair to say more than that, because although others might wish to go further, because we are aware that there is at least one legal challenge being mounted currently about this issue. So, the substance of that I can't comment on, if only because I haven't seen it, but I know that there is something going on there. So I don't know if anyone else wants to add to that.
I can't see any hands, and that probably helps you, Layla, to move on to the many other questions.
I think that was my last question, actually, so I think I'm going back to Rachel.
Could I just add that, of course, in relation to the concerns that have been raised with us on this subject, which have been many and in volume, we of course pass those on and have passed them on to the Cabinet Office. And of course, if anyone has anything further they wish to say about that, then I would advise them to contact the Cabinet Office direct, but if they send stuff to us, we would, of course, pass it on. But I would warn them that we're talking about something that's in the existing regulations as opposed to something in the regulations to come. So it is a matter of which, albeit it was the previous government that maybe have made this decision, the current government adopted it and put it in these regulations. So you are challenging an existing decision of the government.
Okay, thank you. It's helpful. Perhaps not the answer anybody wants, but it's helpful to understand. The next set of questions, these are the last ones that we've received prior to the webinar. I think a lot of it's already been answered, but there is just a little bit. It's around evidence and processing claims. I know that you've talked and provided some answers to those questions already. It's really about giving people more information on how they can navigate the claim process. There is one, there's a couple in here I'm going to do that I don't think have been answered. There's a suggestion here that the case studies that were provided in the past were of use, and someone has suggested that a recent batch of payments that you've talked about already, could they be used to help clarify what individuals need? So I think that essentially it's about, is there real life examples of cases that have gone through? Rachel, I think that probably is aimed at you, because it would be really helpful if people had tangible things that they could identify with. Is there a chance of case studies?
I think that's a great idea. Let me take away and look at that. But the short answer is I think that would be a really good way to explain, as long as we anonymised, of course, the details. We could give some examples of how a case might be considered and how a calculation might be made, etc., rather than give individual details. But yet, really happy to do that. We'll have a look at it. We're currently looking, hopefully you've all seen the new website, ibca.org.uk, and we're currently looking at how we make that information even simpler, especially when we know the second regulations are expected by the end of March. So that would be a great way to do it. Thank you for the suggestion.
Well, and I guess I don't want to, because I really want to leave some time for the questions that, which is well over 100 questions that have come in already. Just a quick one here, maybe for John. What, if anything, this is a question from somebody, can we, the infected and affected, do to help speed up the process ahead of it going through? What questions and information is needed? When do we actually get allocated? Or that's something separate, but when do people get allocated a claims manager? I think you already answered, so that was already answered. So really, maybe John, is just a little hint of what you can do to speed up the process in terms of, I think you actually said most of it just now, but maybe a quick summary.
So, I mean, what I can probably tell you is based on the claims that we've processed so far, I mentioned that, just under half of them had all of the evidence that came across from either the IB scheme or evidence that was captured and, evidence that was within the older closed down schemes. Where that wasn't the case, most of the claimants had that information to hand, and it wasn't, they had it themselves. They had already kind of had that within their reach, and in most of those cases where they sent it, we would have been able to go and ask for that ourselves on their behalf had they not had it. I realise that doesn't answer the question in terms of how can they prepare. I guess, though, what that does do is based on the modest number of claims we've processed so far, accessing the right evidence has not been a challenge in processing those claims. Where we come through, as I anticipate there will be some situations where we need evidence that might be a little tricky to access. As that comes through in the private beta process, we'll be clear to kind of rally around that and focus on that and share with the community where it's helpful for them to do some preparation for their claim with that evidence.
Okay, and I think that, you know, we do through the helpline here, we support people to gather all the information and all the evidence. So I think, yeah, thank you very much for that. There's a great question here. IBCA say that they are learning on the limited amount of claims being processed. Where is the list of lessons learned? These can be anonymized to protect personal data. I think it's a really good question, because I think it's an answer which, quite rightly, you all, you know, it's an expression that's used all the time, we're learning, but where's the list of the lessons? I think it's a great question.
Totally agree. Great question. And by happy coincidence, our community update that went out yesterday had the very first of our lessons learnt, some really interesting ones in there around how people might respond to the invitations to claim, what support they need during a claim, how long they might need to have a think about it once an offer is made, that financial and legal support is proving very useful to those who just want a little bit more information while they're understanding and then deciding whether to accept the calculation. So all of that is in the lessons learned. Hopefully you've seen those. They're bullet pointed in the community update, but we will be sharing more. The intention is that towards the end of this month, we'll be able to share a few more. And in addition to that, you'll know that many community representatives and members of the community will ask for their views on how we might roll out further claims being opened up to larger numbers of people post-March this year. And we also hope to give an update on that in the near future as well, which again, of course, is another big lesson learned.
Yeah, I mean, that's great. There was a question that came up in the chat actually just now about that, you know, the next cohort of people coming through. How do you decide who it is?
Yeah, great question. David, you might want to come in on that, and Cindy possibly as well. I know it's an ongoing discussion that we involve as many community members as possible in, isn't it?
I agree. It is a very important question, possibly the most important question we will do. And we started, as has been our whole approach, which is by trying to see if there are views of the community and if we can take those into account. We've asked many people about this and had many views. Unsurprisingly, contrasting and different views as well from that. But that has been an incredibly important learning thing for us. It's a big decision for our board. So our board is the group of people who govern the authority, and what we're doing is compiling the best set of information we can for the board to take the best decision it can, taking into account community views, taking into account things like how fast we can develop and how fast we can move forward. Our aim is to pay as many people their full compensation as fast as possible, and all those factors need to be taken into account. So it's a complex and difficult decision. It's obviously a crucial decision, because what isn't possible is to pay everybody all at the same time immediately, and that's the tension that we've got to make. But as we said, we will tell the community as soon as we know, and they will be the first people to hear about that decision and how we arrived at it as well.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm not quite sure if I understand that, so I don't know if everybody would, but yeah, I understand, and I hear that it's really complicated. There's a couple of examples here, and then I wonder, Layla and Deborah, whether you have got a track of any additional questions that have come up that are not here. So I guess last ones here that I've got one here around, is it necessary to have a solicitor to give advice for compensation package, or is the advice to be given by the scheme independently?
Yeah, let me go to Sir Robert, and Cindy may want to come in on that one as well.
Oops, you're on mute, Sir Robert.
Always one of us. When I was asked to look at the scheme before I became chair of the authority, I did recommend that there should be made available independent legal support for claimants. And I didn't specify quite what that form should be. The authority itself is seeking to design a process which, so far as possible, is easy enough for people to access and have their claim dealt with without the advice of the solicitors. We would, by reason, by help, for example, by helping them get the evidence they need for their claim to be successful. But we have recognised that people may wish to seek legal advice, and the government agrees with that, and has committed to providing the funding for it. And we have an arrangement in place, which, like everything else, is on a trial basis. But at the moment, anyone whose claim we're processing will be offered the opportunity of getting legal support, and that will cover assistance from a lawyer to help confirm the information being used to calculate your claim is correct, advising on whether the offer has been calculated correctly, supporting you with advice of whether you need to or want an internal review of your decision, and sharing information on your behalf if they have it. So those are the areas where we are able to fund legal support. Of those who've claimed so far, as I understand it, and this is a changing picture all the time, some half have taken up the offer of legal support, and about half have been happy to proceed without it. So that gives you some idea as to where we are with the current cohort of claims.
Oh, you're on mute, Rachel.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, come on in, Cindy.
I was just going to add to that. So Sarah Abad just mentioned there an internal review. So if you're not happy with your decision and you want to challenge it, you can ask for a review of your decision. If you think we've got your eligibility wrong, if you think the calculations wrong when you look at the legislation, then we will do a review, and that will be conducted by a different claim manager and perhaps a panel as well. So financial assessor will have a look at it, a legal representative will have a look at it, if necessary a clinical advisor as well, to come back out with that revised decision or confirmation that actually our decision was right. And if not happy with that, you can of course appeal then to the tribunal. I just thought that was worthy of mention, Rachel.
Thanks, Cindy.
I probably ought to have added that there is as it were, a panel of solicitors, largely solicitors who've been involved in the inquiry, who have entered into an agreement with us to be available to give the advice. People aren't obliged to go to one of them for advice, but of course many are already their clients. So that we hope will work, and we will work with those lawyers over the coming months to work out whether the support being provided is adequate, needs adjusting, and so on.
Perfect, thank you. I'm really conscious that we've only got 13 minutes left, so I don't know, Layla, Deborah, do you think we should just pull out a couple of questions that haven't been covered?
Yeah, I've been having a quick look through. There are quite a lot of questions regarding the 3 new roles that have been announced this week. Queries about how those roles are developed, that they were advertised as I think full-time roles based in Newcastle and now aren't. And just I think a lot of queries about how that works. So I don't know, Rachel, or someone, if you can come in there.
Yeah, no problem. I can come in on those. So for anyone who hasn't seen it in our latest community update, we've appointed 3 user consultants. And what that means is 3 people who are eligible for the scheme, i.e. Who will be users of the scheme, who've come in and will be working with IBCA to talk to us about their experiences. Now, I should be really, really clear here that those 3 people are not expected, and certainly shouldn't be, representing all your voices across the community. There's no way 3 people can do that, and neither should they. We will continue with a significant engagement program, which means we want to talk to as many of you as possible and hear your voices. But the reason why we brought in those 3 people is as we work in IBCA on things like our processes and how best we support when people are claiming, many things like communications and training for our claim managers, all that kind of stuff. It's incredibly useful to make sure on a day-to-day basis that we are absolutely hearing how that would impact on someone who is going to use the scheme. Now, in addition to having those 3 people, we of course do a lot of user testing as well, where we bring in other members of the community to have a look at our services and say, are they working or not? But having people on a day-to-day basis really means we can do that on everything we're working on. In terms of the question around how they were recruited in our usual fair and open competition, as it's called. They were advertised on civil service jobs, because until we become a fully fledged employer, which is happening over the next few months, we have to employ via the civil service, and then they'll move to become, we'll all move to become public servants after that happens. But I should say that we also, in addition to advertising that to everyone, it was open to anyone to apply. We made sure that we mentioned it in the community update, which goes to around 6,000 people who have signed up in the community, just so everyone was aware of it. It didn't get missed and they could apply. On the question of they were advertised as full-time and in Newcastle, we are an equal employer, which essentially means if anyone who is applying for a role has a reasonable adjustment, I'm not talking about the individuals here because that would be wrong to do so, but if anyone who is applying for a job requests a reasonable adjustment, which means they may request a different location to be based in, they may request different working hours, we as an equal employer always ensure that we consider that and decide if that's possible within the job role. So if you're wondering why, hang on a minute, you have some jobs, not just these ones, but others too, that might be advertised in one place or with certain working hours, as an equal employer, we always consider other requests if they will work for the business and what we need to deliver.
While we gap into thinking the next question, could I just add that I regard these 3 people, obviously not as the only source, by far from it, of advice, but I thought it was really important to have some people, and there obviously has to be a choice of who they are, who are inside the tent, who can provide us with a constant presence of a conscience, actually. It's very easy for institutions to get on with a job and not care enough about the people in the outside world. These people are there to be from the outside, but to continually remind us why we're doing this job.
Deborah has her hand up.
Yes, thank you. So just 2 questions that have come up repeatedly. First of all was about payments to estates. Will there be payments to estates within that sort of 250 that you're thinking of towards March? Because obviously the legislation for estates has been laid, so that's come up quite a bit. And the other thing is whether, if you're looking at the time delay between when full compensation will be paid for people, is it within your remit to actually look at the interest payment? So if you're getting, a few £100,000 January this year compared to January next year, that is quite a lot of difference interest you could be earning. I'm not sure if that's within your remit, but a comment on that would be useful, I think.
Thank you. David, do you want to come in first on estates? And feel free to cover the interest question, or if you don't want to, somebody else can put their hand up. I'm sure you will.
I'll try and do both. Rachel, yes. So currently our cohorts don't contain any estates. I've just posted an answer to Ian the 4 criteria that we use for selecting people across the cohorts at the moment, and I'll just repeat them. I mentioned these at the beginning. So we look for people who are known to be already eligible for compensation. Secondly, that they are registered with existing support schemes. Thirdly, that they're from areas all across the UK. And fourthly, that they represent a range of infection types and severity within those infections. Those are the criteria that we are using at the moment. We are thinking, Deborah, about whether we should change that in any of the cohorts, but at the moment we are using those criteria as our choice for bringing people into the cohorts. On the interest rate, there is no scope within the regulations to pay interest, so that doesn't give us the power to do that. So we are not able to pay interest on any compensation due at any particular date. You have to remember as well, the compensation calculation looks forward and backwards. So in that sense, when it's paid, doesn't materially make a difference. From the date it's calculated, it looks forwards and backwards. But to be clear, there is no scope in the regulations for paying interest.
Deborah, is it back to you?
Or Layla, I mean, any questions, or to be quite honest, any of you there also, if you've seen questions come up, is there anything that stands out to anybody that we think hasn't? I mean, I just want to say to everybody on the webinar that there is, I mean, I've lost count because the counter only went up to 99. You know, we must be up to about 150, 160 questions now.
260.
264, there you go, 264 questions. I just found the place where it says it is. We will absolutely group them and get responses if you feel that you think that throughout the conversation in the webinar it hasn't been answered. It's quite difficult to go back through and find. Is there anything that Layla? Rach, you got your hand up. Perhaps there's one that you can see.
Thank you. Yeah, there was a very early question, which I'm conscious I don't think we've answered yet, around if someone has cleared an infection, are they still able to claim? And the answer is yes. If you have cleared an infection, you are still eligible, or may still be eligible, I should say, depending on your personal circumstances. So please make sure you sign up to the newsletter, then you'll know when claims are open, and you can go through that claims process with us.
I just note that's true for hepatitis C, but if you have cleared hepatitis B, then that is not within the current framework.
Thank you, Layla. That's a helpful clarification.
I'm just looking through some of the earlier ones as well, and an awful lot of them are about timing. You know, there's a real urgency, understandably, for people to have responses and to have their claims looked at. Deborah, sorry, I didn't see your hand up.
No, it's fine. There's actually a question that somebody put up was, will all infected be paid before the affected? And I'm going to refer to you, David, because I remember when you came to our conference and you talked about once the second legislation come through, how you were going to plan to try and group people together. Do you want to come in on that one?
I mentioned earlier there's a board decision which will decide how we develop post April. I don't want to prejudice that decision. It's important for the board to take that decision. But I can't envisage a situation where we don't start paying people who are eligible until everybody in another section has been paid. I think there's a lot that gets happened at the same time things go along, and also as I mentioned in the comments, there's something about you have to be able to connect the cases together. So it's really important for any affected case to be able to proceed that there's an infected case that it can be related to. And there is also, of course, the great advantage in being able to see how that connection works. So we will know from the board decision how we will go post April, and you see I'm being very careful not to describe what it is, because that is a decision to be taken. But I don't envisage that there will be a world where we say a whole group of people who are due compensation will not get paid until everybody else has been paid.
Right. There was another hand up somewhere. Layla, did you have your hand up?
It was mine. I think David's just answered it. There are quite a lot of questions as well about the discrepancy between actual payments, I think, and the compensation amounts set out on the IBCA website. That these are lower than the ones that were set out in the original guidance. I think that's the query, isn't it?
Yeah.
I appreciate we've got 2 minutes, but I don't know if anyone wants to very quickly say anything about that before we close.
So Robert or David, is that one that either of you are able to pick up?
David, please.
Yeah, apologies. I was still reflecting on the last question. Layla, would you mind repeating that?
So why are compensation amounts for infected people set out on the IBCA website lower than the total amounts set out in the illustrative tables published by the proposal paper, by the earlier papers?
I genuinely don't know, Layla. So can we take that away and come back to people with the answer? We'll make those comparisons to see what the difference is and why there's a discrepancy.
And as with other questions, Layla, if there's anything that's gone unanswered, please do send them over to us, and we'll absolutely make sure that we get answers back to you to share with those who've attended and the community.
Okay, well, as we have 1 minute left, rather than ask another question, because I don't think there's time, is there anything that, you know, I'll leave it open to anybody. Is there anything that you'd like to end on? I mean, personally, I'd just like to say thank you very much to everybody attending the webinar. I hope that it's been useful. We will, and to reassure you, we will absolutely look at all the questions and make sure that anything that hasn't been answered is answered. Thank you to everybody here who's with us. And Robert, I'll hand it over to, sorry, Sir Robert, I'll hand it over to you. Sorry.
Robert's fine. But
Sorry.
just firstly, just to thank everyone, both who organised this and who's attended today. And I appreciate two frustrations. One is that clearly there are a lot of questions we haven't yet answered, but that, you know, we'd be here all day and we still wouldn't have answered them all, I'm sure. But the second frustration is, everyone please accept that we understand the frustration, the real anxiety that we share, that payments need to be made soon and quickly, particularly to people who are not very well and who want to sort out matters frankly before they die. We understand all that, and if that's what keeps us awake, that's what keeps us motivated to do more. But it is necessary that we have systems that are secure, that do the job properly, and don't cause more distress than people are already suffering from. So I do ask you to bear with us and accept our good faith that we are doing our best. And the one thing we will do is to tell you what we're doing, how we're doing it, and what our expectations are. And sometimes those won't be easy messages, but we will give you that news, whether we think it's good or bad. Because that's all we can do. No one, of course, the whole reason we have a compensation scheme is that things have happened that everyone would wish now had never happened, and we are in a position no one would have chosen us to be in, and it's our job to do what we can to remedy at least some of that within our power. But there is a practical problems which we will continue to explain to you as we come across them. But thank you very much for listening, and I hope that you have benefited from this as much as I think we have.
Thank you. And I guess, you know, on behalf of, I hope I'm not overstepping here, Deborah, on behalf of Haemophilia and Thalassaemia, the Hepatitis C Trust would, you know, maybe all together again, would be happy to facilitate another session like this if, you know, those attendees think it's been helpful and useful. So let us know. You've got our email addresses, and I don't think there's anything else to say, but thank you very much. Have a great evening. Much more to do. And I hope that at least some questions have been answered. So thank you very much for joining us. Thank you.